Hello, and thank you for joining me today for Unified Leadership Training as part of your club officer training. My name is Mindy Begenat. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm a certified diversity professional. I serve as the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Partner at TDS Telecommunications based out of Madison, Wisconsin, and I'm located in Des Moines, Iowa with 8 years of experience in diversity, equity, and inclusion work. Today, I'm going to walk you through some steps around unified leadership. So we're going to start with the very beginning and talk about terms and why this matters. And then we're going to move into some specifics around unified leadership. So things like the iceberg model, unconscious bias. We're then going to talk about the continuum between unaware to active, and then what your role is before we conclude for the day. So, unified leadership is intrinsic to successful clubs. When people feel they belong, they're more likely to stay, participate, and bring their best selves to the table. Today, we're going to talk about being an inclusive and welcoming leader within your club. I like to start off all trainings with a brief refresher on the terms we're going to be using to ensure that we're all on the same page. The first term that I'm going to talk about is diversity, which is all the ways that people are different and the same as at an individual and group level. Even when people appear the same, they're all different. Equity is the fair and just treatment of all members of a community. And inclusion is the intentional effort to ensure that diverse individuals fully participate in all aspects of an organizational work, including the decision-making process. When we talk about unity, that means being together or at one with something or someone. It's the opposite of being divided. It's the word for togetherness and oneness. Unconscious bias, or the term bias, refers to the unconscious assumptions, beliefs, attitudes, and stereotypes that human brains have about different groups. These learned mental shortcuts affect how we perceive and respond to people. And lastly, belonging is the feeling of security and support when there is a sense of acceptance, inclusion, and identity for members of a certain group. So you may be asking yourself, why does this matter as part of my club officer training? Well, it's important because millennials and Gen Z make up the majority of the current workforce where most of our members come from, and they expect organizations that they participate in to align with their values. So 40% of millennials and 44% of Gen Z have turned down an employer based on their personal ethics or beliefs. If they're willing to do that for an employer, imagine how they feel about an organization they spend their money on. It also matters because when a person feels they can bring their whole self to an organization, they're more likely to stay with that organization. Inclusive leadership is imperative to maintaining successful, innovative, thriving organizations or clubs. So now the first thing I want to talk about is the iceberg model. When we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, oftentimes we talk about an iceberg because 90% of an iceberg is below the surface. So when we talk about unified leadership, we often reference this iceberg model because it's easy to assume that you know someone based off the traits that you can see in the person. However, much like an iceberg, a majority of who we are is hidden below the waterline. You may be able to recognize things like age or accent, appearance, and tone from looking or listening to a person, but you can't determine things like their veteran status, their communication style, religion, talents, abilities, etc. These are the things that make up their different dimensions. Which brings us to unconscious bias. Based on what we know about a person, our bias may begin to take over and make assumptions. Bias is a natural function of our brain. It was developed as a way for our brains to make mental shortcuts to quickly assess situations and make a decision, a skill that was incredibly important when our survival required split-second decisions to avoid getting eaten by animals. However, we're bombarded with so much information daily that our brains resort to mental shortcuts to make decisions quickly and effectively. In order to do this, the mental shortcuts we rely on often utilize developed biases to identify options to move forward. Some common biases that we often see are things like confirmation bias, or the tendency to interpret new evidence as confirmation of one's existing beliefs or theories. Affinity bias, it refers to, may also be called similarity bias. So it's an unconscious human tendency to gravitate towards other people with similar backgrounds, interests, and beliefs. A halo effect is when you make a snap judgment about someone on the basis of one positive trait. And on the opposite side, a horn effect is when you make a snap judgment on someone based off of one negative trait. And then implicit bias is the negative attitude of which one is not consciously aware against a specific social group. When we talk about bias, it's important to recognize it in yourself first before you can recognize it in others. The first place that you go to do so is really framing your mindset around self-improvement. That is why we're here after all. We want to make sure that as we jump into the process of our bias, recognizing bias, we're looking at our the frame that we're looking at the frame that we're going through and making sure that that frame is setting us up for positive expectations around self-improvement. Second, we really want to focus on introspection. Bias is shaped by factors that make us who we are. So take time to unpack those factors and discover the ways that they may have shaped your mindset. That's everything from the people that you know to the media that you utilize and come in contact with, to the way that you were raised and the way that you grew up, where you grew up, who you grew up with. All of those things are shaped into your biases. And lastly, mindfulness. So we know, we talked about previously, that bias exists as a shortcut that our brains take. So by slowing down, we can question our initial thoughts and ask ourselves why we thought that, really recognize that bias, and then take a moment to stop and overcome it. When we talk about overcoming bias, really individualizing people is one of the best ways to work on overcoming biases. When we see someone as an individual rather than part of a group, whether that's women, immigrants, LGBTQ, we allow ourselves to challenge our biases and learn about the person with empathy and curiosity. So, empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of others. If we have too much empathy and not enough curiosity, we listen without understanding. We feel sympathy rather than empathy. And and curiosity is the strong desire to know or learn something. If we have too much curiosity, we make an intellectual connection without emotions. We ask questions, but we don't recognize the way our questions make the other person feel. The sweet spot is a balance between empathy and curiosity, when we can look past our biases and understand people who have different learned experiences. In her book, How to Be an Inclusive Leader, Jennifer Brown introduces us to the inclusive leadership continuum, a roadmap for evolving leadership skills. It starts with unaware, which is really the thought process that diversity is a compliance related subject, someone else's job and not yours to worry about. Then you move into aware, where you're aware that you have a role to play and you're educating yourself on how to move forward. Active is where you've shifted your priorities and you're finding your voice as you start to take meaningful action towards supporting others. And advocate is really the end of the continuum, where you are proactively and consistently confronting discrimination and working to bring about change. This is a continuum, so it's not a straight line. Really, you may find yourself ongoing and reevaluating your position within this. So you may find in one space you were unaware, you became aware, and then you look at another space and you bring yourself back to unaware before moving to active. So it really just involves learning and understanding and taking time to really ask yourself, where are you within your journey as you go through there? For your role as a leader in a club, it's most important for you to be working from the aware to active stage to support your club members most effectively. So everyone starts their journey somewhere. Often people start in the unaware stage. It's easy to stay in this stage believing we have the best intentions and that things will work out. Unfortunately, it takes real effort to disrupt the status quo. So through this training, you're moving yourself from unaware to aware, becoming acclimated in the terms and foundational understanding of unified leadership. The first thing you want to do in this stage is take stock of your understanding. A great way to start that is to ask yourself, who do you most often surround yourself by? And where is the diversity within that group of people? You can start by doing a network audit. You can see on the table on the screen, a network audit involves listing out the people closest to you, not those related to you, and marking where you are similar with them in a number of different dimensions, whether that be ethnicity, age, gender, education, socioeconomic background, gender identity and sexual orientation, abilities, marital status, parental status, political beliefs. This will allow you to see how you are similar to your network and where you have people that are different than you. You want to ask yourself some questions after you do that. The first thing you're going to ask yourself is, am I reliant on old ways of doing things? Why? What does that serve me? In what ways does it not serve me? Where am I exposed to differences? Where can I go to be in the company of people who are different than me? What do I realize I know little about when it comes to diversity-related experiences of others? Once you move out of that active or the unaware stage into the aware stage, then you're really looking at yourself and spending a lot of time doing learning, listening, and deep reflection about your life experiences and how they're not the same as the experiences of others. There's a level of discomfort in this stage as you venture out of your comfort zone and really dive deep into the experiences of others. The most important step in this stage is to listen. We want to listen with an empathetic and curious mind to different communities of people and be truly present to learn information that may be new or uncomfortable to you, to grow in your level of awareness. As we think about moving to the active stage, we want to ask ourselves, what is an encounter that we've had with someone who is different than me that influenced me in a positive way? How do I continue to gather new information and expose myself to new perspectives? And do I feel comfortable calling out biases in myself and others? Why or why not? As leaders, your role is to build a sense of belonging amongst your Toastmasters group. In order to do so, you need to incorporate unified and inclusive leadership. This journey is a continuum that never ends, but your role requires that you move from unaware to aware and work towards the state of being active. Thank you for taking your time today and for your continued dedication to developing your leadership skills. I hope that I've left you with new information that you can take and implement as you continue your leadership journey. This concludes our session. Thank you.